Joining me now to talk about all this, General Jack Keane, retired four-star general, Fox News senior strategic analyst. General Keane, sir, welcome back as always. I've got a twofold for you. We're going to go long. We're going to, if you can do it, hold you over for another segment because this Iranian story is blowing my mind, absolutely blowing my mind. But I want to begin with the Ukraine story. How do you see things? It kind of reads to me like the Russians are blocking the ports, bombing civilians. They have about 20% of the territory. What do you think, sir?
Well, it's almost like there's two wars taking place at the same time, Larry. In the south, the Russians are experiencing some real success. They've taken Kherson, as mentioned. They're on their way to Odessa. They're surrounded Mariupol as well on the east. And within a few days, I would imagine they will control all the waterway in the southern part of Ukraine. I mean, that's the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov, and literally cut off any of the imports or exports and Ukrainian significant economic lifeline that those ports represent. However, in the north, it's like a completely different campaign. It is not going well for the Russians at all. When it comes to Kyiv, we've been talking about a convoy that's been lined up for over 3 days now and still has not been able to make significant headway. We know what the plan is. Part of it goes west around Kyiv. Another part goes east around Kyiv, separated by the river. They've tried to do both of those, and in both occasions it stopped by the Ukrainian resistance. They also brought forces out of Belarus, again, to open up a new axis on the west side of the river, and that has been stopped, cold stop. So there is real challenges taking place when it comes to Kyiv and also Kharkiv in the northeast. Similar challenges. They've surrounded that city. They put obviously some area attack weapons into it, rockets and missiles and air bombing, but they still haven't got their combat troops in that city to take control of it. So two campaigns, one in the south going reasonably well, one in the north here not going well at all. From a military standpoint, how does this get resolved? I mean, it just seems like the cards are stacked against the Ukrainians. But you've said time and again, you've been right. The Russians cannot get it done. They cannot get Kiev. This 40-mile convoy thing has not panned out for them. Their army has underperformed very badly. The whole world's talking about it. But they are beginning to close off the ports down south. So I'm just trying to think this through in the next few days. What happens? Yeah, well, they'll have enough. They will generate enough forces, either with what they have. We've also been told that they've alerted forces as far away as the Far East on the Pacific coast to get into this fight. That's a week by rail. So it underscores the challenges they're having. Number two, it also underscores the determination. I mean, Russia has enough military forces, despite some of the incompetence that we're seeing, despite the problems that their generals are having in terms of putting together a coherent and effective campaign plan here. They have enough throughput still to accomplish their goal, which is to take these cities and also to transfer the government. That, I think, is a path we're on. It's taken a lot longer than it should. And by the way, there's still so much we can do, Larry. I'm concerned the administration isn't all in on what the Ukrainians need in terms of military hardware assistance. There's a lot we can give them. And I'm not certain we're doing all of that. There's different types of anti-tank weapons we haven't given them, 60-millimeter mortars. There's 14.75 rockets that are normally slapped on aircraft, helicopters to fire, but you can fire them off of burns. I mean, we got to use some imagination here and get this stuff to them. Right now, the Ukrainians are driving to the Polish border to pick up the shipments. I think we should deliver some of these shipments covertly to them. I mean, as you know, and I don't care what state you're in, there's plenty of airports like we have in our country over there. They don't even have lights at night. They're for private airplanes. We have capability to slip in there, unload that, and get it to the Ukrainians, change the airport every night. Do this covertly and get the job done. An air bridge is much better than what this road convoy business is going on. Also, these columns that are stacked up that we've been watching on television for 4 or 5 days, we should assist them also covertly. Now, this is a tough decision. The president's got to have his staff run what the risks are and everything, but we know how to do this, how to have deniability. I can't get into what the means is, but we have the capability covertly to do real damage to that convoy.
I'm aware. Yes,
with
I'm aware.
Some deniability to it, and you've heard those discussions.
There are
before.
ways and means. I've set in on some of that stuff. I guess the question I have, sir, is, what's the White House waiting for? What are they waiting for? I mean, they have opportunities. You're saying, basically, because of the failures of the Russian army and this long convoy and so forth, the door is open to keep helping Ukraine. The game is far from over. So we should be doing everything we can. What are we waiting for?
I totally agree with that. I think the night of the State of the Union speech, the President of the United States unequivocally should have told the Ukrainian people that we are not going to let this stand. Mm-hmm. We're going to give you every piece of assistance we can while you're in the fight. And if the Russians take over your country, we're going to assist you with everything we can to get all of those Russian soldiers out of your country, no matter how long it takes. Well, that message should have been delivered to them.
Yes, sir. Instead, and we're going to please hold you over next segment. Instead, it is now being reported in a number of media outlets that the United States, the Biden administration, is on the verge of making a deal with one of Moscow's big pals, and that is the Iranian mullahs, the most extraordinary news I've seen, at least outside of the Ukraine. $11 billion to appease Iran. General Keane, please stay with us. We're going to talk some more about this extraordinary news. Folks, there's just no end to it. There's no end to it. And I don't apologize for my defense of what I believe my former boss, Donald Trump, would have done. You have to be tough and action-oriented and stand up for America first. I'm Kudlow. We'll be right back with General Keane about this crazy Iranian story, which is almost inconceivable to me. All right, we're back with General Jack Keane, retired four-star general, Fox News senior strategic analyst. Thank you for staying over, General Keane. I mean, I'll tell you, sir, I'm staggered. I read one article in the New York Sun. I read another article just hot out on the Wall Street Journal website that we are within, I don't know, hours, days of a deal with Iran, a new deal with Iran in the middle of this Russian Putin-Ukrainian invasion, paying up to $11 billion, allegedly for 4 American hostages, unfreezing, I'll just read you the headline, unfreezing $7 billion from Iranian funds held in South Korea. There's another couple of $1 billion frozen in Japan, Iraq, and China. The pot would come to $11 billion. But here we are going to make a deal. The UN just put out another advisory that says Iran is very close, very close. They may, in fact, have the resources, the uranium resources, from a nuclear bomb. And one of the inspectors is going to some kind of meeting, probably in Austria or Switzerland. Anyway, they still can't get in to verify. This is why Trump pulled out of this thing years ago in the first place. We're about to make a deal with Iran right now? Really? I can't hear him. I'm sorry, not quite.
That's negotiating this deal is the same team that negotiated the last deal. And the fact is that that last deal was a lousy deal and President Trump got out of it. This deal is going to be worse than the last one, Larry. That's the path that we're on.
How is that possible? Here, I'm going to read you some more. IAEA chief heads to Iran as regime seeks to scrap probe of its undeclared nuke sites. They're going to scrap the probe of undeclared nuclear sites. And we're going to give them $11 billion for 4 hostages. I mean, look, God bless the hostages, but we know that strategy doesn't work. I thought the United States had a policy of not paying ransom for hostages because they'll only incentivize them to do more. I mean, and now in the middle, I mean, Iran's ally is Moscow, Russia, Putin. I mean, General Keane, I'm baffled by this. I mean, there's a part of me that's baffled and a part of me that's furious. I'll leave it at that. I don't get it. On what grounds would we do this?
Yeah, well, I think they're also doing it now, given the crisis that's going on, thinking they're not going to be receiving as much pushback as they would normally over something as fatal as this is. Listen, when the sanction relief money comes in as well, I mean, it's going to be a ton of money that the mullahs are going to get once again. And we know what they will do with it, Larry, because we watched their behavior when the 2015 deal was constructed. They toppled the government. The Houthis toppled the government in Yemen. They fueled the civil war in Syria. They bought tens of thousands of rockets for the Hezbollah and Hamas to rain down on Israel. And the Houthis are firing rockets and missiles routinely at Saudi Arabia and the UAE. So this is what they're going to do with the money. And it's a fact that their intent is to exercise increased control of the Middle East at the expense of the United States and our allies. And our allies, the Arabs and the Israelis, have pushed back and they've told the administration not to do this. What we should be doing is reinforcing the Abraham Accords. Strengthening the defense of the Arabs and the Israelis is what that is all about. That should be our major foreign policy effort. And at the same time, putting back on the table with the Israelis a military option to control the growth and development of Iran's nuclear program. But this giveaway program just means more violence and more lack of stability in the Middle East and more people being killed. I mean, it is frustrating to see us absolutely repeating the same mistake we made in 2015.
You know, and the UN is reporting, the UN, not like the UN is some great American first backer, but the UN is reporting that Iran is getting closer to a nuclear bomb. Not slower, closer, faster than the schedule. You know, fortunately, Trump pulled out of the thing, so but they're still working on that. I mean, I'm just trying to think. I'm putting myself back in the White House and in meetings and saying, what possible justification would the United States have to make a deal with Iran and pay them $11 billion? What possible justification?
Well, you know, when you pay $11 billion to get the hostages back, and certainly you can understand the family's position on something like this, but there has to be a foreign policy decision here. I mean, that puts the Iranians right back in the hostage business again as soon as they get the $11 billion. What a windfall that is for them. That's a significant percentage of their budget that we're providing to them here. It is extraordinarily significant. And as I said, when the sanction windfall money comes in, that also is going to add another dimension to this. It is absolutely going against U.S. interests and that of our allies in the region. There are other ways to get hostages out and do swaps, etc. I'm all for getting the hostages out, and they've been there too long to begin with. But they're right back in the hostage business again as soon as they get this money, Larry, because it pays, and pays significantly.
The Iranian budget is $40 billion. You're right. So this would be $11 billion out of the $40 billion, which is right there incredible. And I'll just read you. This is from Benny Abney, who's a veteran reporter in the Middle East, again in the New York Sun. A former America hostage in Iran, I probably won't pronounce his first name, but it looks like Xiu Wang. He warns, he was a former hostage, he got out. I believe he's a student at Princeton, or was. Such a deal would encourage more undue imprisonments in Iran. Washington has posed not a single sanction in connection with Iran's frequent hostage taking, Mr. Wang told The Sun. So they have no reason to swap it. Keeping people in prison costs them nothing. And we're just going to blunder right into this. So we're going to give money, as you say, to keep bombing and providing terrorist activities throughout the Middle East against the Abraham Accords. B, we're going to dump our hostage policy, which is supposedly we're not going to pay to get hostages out. And C, oh, by the way, Putin is the world's most evil-hated guy, and Iran is allied with Putin. So we're helping Putin here? I don't get that either.
No, there's no doubt about it. I mean, they are strategically aligned in the Middle East. The Russians went into Syria to provide air power to Assad, who was starting to have serious problems. It was Qasem Soleimani in the spring of 2014 that went to Moscow and persuaded Putin to get involved in the Syrian war because Assad was about to lose. And that is exactly what Putin did. He rescued Assad and propped that regime up. Mm-hmm. The ground force that fights effectively in Syria are the Iranians. Tens of thousands of their proxies are the ground force. The Russians, the air power, the Iranians are doing the fighting. The Iranian generals are in charge of the war. They are linked, Russia and Iran, when it comes to the Middle East. You know, that's just the facts of it.
I'd forgotten that. You're exactly right. Thank you for that. Well, live and learn, sir. I don't know. We'll talk some more about this. General Jack Keane, by the way, chairman of the Institute for the Study of War. Don't want to let that out. General Keane, thank you, sir, as always.